All right, good afternoon and welcome everyone to our Seven Investing podcast. I'm Seven Investing founder and CEO Simon Erickson, joined by my colleague, Seven Investing lead advisor Steve Symington. We're going to be talking about robotics on today's show, which is a topic that's really interesting, really innovating quickly out there. And so we brought in some experts to share their opinions of this space. Brian Gahsman is the Chief Investment Officer of the Contego Capital Groups, also the portfolio manager of the AlphaCentric Robotics and Automation Fund. Ticker on that is GNXIX. He's also got his analyst from the Contego Group, Jen Kwan, joining us on the call this afternoon. Gentlemen, thanks for being here with Seven Investing.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Brian, you and I have chatted for years about robotics. I've always enjoyed these conversations, but the last time I think that we spoke was before COVID entered the picture. How do you think that this last year has impacted the robotics market at the 10,000 foot level?
I think it's been I hate to say anything positive about COVID, but as far as robotics are concerned, with the social distancing and, we still have to have manufacturing. There's products that still need to be made, but at, a normal manufacturing line, when you have to have 6 feet separation between two people, well, then you're going to have product loss, right? You're going to have capacity issues. So there's been over 36.7% increase in orders for robots since year-over-year since COVID has started. Because if you don't have that one person in the middle in the manufacturing line, you got to have a robot in the middle. And so that has kind of happened throughout this whole past year, this whole period, so that companies can continue to manufacture as many products. And I don't see it going backwards by any means. The global adoption has already been increased exponentially over the years, but then with COVID now, it's just increased significantly. If not for the semiconductor shortage right now, I wouldn't be surprised if it was that 36.7 rate was more like 60%. But COVID has greatly escalated the adoption all around the world, and orders are up. So I think that we're just in a new work environment, a new workplace, whether it's manufacturing or anything else. We're obviously doing this call over Zoom. A lot of people are working from home now. But as far as automation, I think a lot of companies that were kind of on the fence about automating or using robotics have kind of just been pushed over the cliff because there's really has been no other option to survive over the past year, and we're seeing that in the the sales numbers, the revenue numbers from these robotics companies all around the world.
Beautiful. So that kind of, I guess you can look back and see how things have been accelerated, and I agree, it's been kind of fantastic to watch. Maybe one of the few silver linings for investors in the amid the COVID pandemic, but taking a more maybe present and forward-looking stance, investors have been kind of bombarded with here's a way to play 5G. 5G is such a massive opportunity. Lots of different ways it can take advantage. But one sneaky way to play 5G is through the robotics industry. Can you talk a little bit about how 5G is impacting and potentially fueling robotics?
Yeah, sure. So there's a couple things. So prior to 5G, a lot of robots had to be tethered to something, right? Attached to a cord. So how do you implement robotics and automation in agriculture and a farm field with tethered robots, right? That doesn't really work out too well. With 5G, the amount of data that's able to be transferred wirelessly, the latency issues that have been cleaned up. Now we have the ability to cut the cord on the robots, and that's significant in almost every industry group as far as robots are concerned. Now, going beyond that, if you look at more precision things like surgical robotics, I recently did an interview and I got to play with the Stereotex GNXIX system from here in Minnesota, and the robot was in St. Louis. And I'm here with my mouse controlling the machine on my monitor looking at moving a catheter around electromagnetically in St. Louis. It was a fake heart, by the way. But,
wow. Yeah, that's awesome.
But the thing is that, so like scrolling in and out with my mouse, I'm moving the catheter back and forth inside of this heart from here. No latency, just, in milliseconds, my movement, it's moving over there. Before 5G, that was going to be difficult. I mean, there's been a lot of companies, Intuitive Surgical's been working on telerobotics for quite some time. And Stereotaxis, obviously, and Accuray, and I believe Corindus was before they were acquired. But now with 5G, it's actually precise. I mean, the precision, zero latency, zero margin for error. But that's from a surgeon anywhere in the world operating on a patient anywhere in the world. So those are kind of the fundamental aspects of how 5G has actually revolutionized every aspect of robotics.
Yeah, let's double click on that surgical robots topic there, Brian. And I mean that pun intended, since you actually probably were double clicking when you actually got to control the robot itself. I mean, as investors, we know Intuitive Surgical, right? This is probably the most well-named publicly traded company that's in surgical robotics right now. But you mentioned a couple others, right? Stereotaxis, you mentioned Accuray, you mentioned as well. I mean, are there lesser known companies that are on your radar in this space that you think could be investment opportunities for us?
Well, I think all the companies on my radar are lesser known. They always kind of have been. But, back in 2013, when I started, building my universe of robotics companies, I mean, we had Intuitive Surgical. That was it for surgical robotics. That over the past few years has become a group of almost 16 to 20 different names. They're everywhere from laparoscopic surgery, cardiovascular surgery, dental surgery. There's restoration robotics that was acquired. I mean, they're doing hair implants with robotics. I mean, just across the spectrum, that space has grown significantly just over the past few years. Now, there's also a lot of consolidation in the space because we all know that there are a few large players in the medical device arena. And, the days of Intuitive Surgical trading under $100, going up to over $1,000, doing a reverse three-way split and being back up to $800 now. I mean, they're too expensive now. They're a main player. Their market cap is reaching, significant to like Stryker and other companies. But the medical device companies have learned over the past few years that you better not let any of these guys go that far or get that large. When Mazor Robotics was purchased by Medtronic, it was a strategic partnership, and I mean, I think there were some capacity issues, if I remember correctly, and then that partnership turned into an acquisition. But that went, I don't know, I think we bought it at $8, and it was acquired for around $50 or so. But since then, one of these companies gets to about $10 or $15, and it's gobbled up by one of these players, whether it's Medtronic or Siemens or Stryker or whichever, which is kind of unfortunate from the investment standpoint because you want these guys to run. I want it to be $100 stock, but it's just the learning curve. It's the new way that we're doing medicine. It's with surgical robotics and telerobotics. It just makes sense because you don't always have a doctor or a specialist in the same location as you have a patient with a critical issue that has to happen right now. With telerobotics, I mean, it's saves lives. There's a doctor everywhere in the world now. As long as there's a device in one location, there's a doctor with a computer in another location. I mean, just the impact of human life in general, it's extreme. So the medical space has kind of been revolutionized over the past couple of years, and I don't know how much focus anyone is paying attention to that, but it's changing significantly.
How about Accuray? Jen, can you talk a little bit about Accuray? I think that was another company you guys mentioned just a minute ago.
Yeah, I would love to. Kind of going back to like what Brian was saying, how robotics has changed the entire field of healthcare. When Brian and I are doing analytics on these companies, we really look at, God forbid, if like any of us had something that went wrong. So Accuray focuses on cancer, but if something were to go wrong, we would want the best for our friends, our family to be treated by the best doctor and the best robotic systems possible, And that's how we kind of like gauge our analytics and investments. What will we decide on if something were to happen? And kind of going back to Accuray, so 1 in 2 women in this world are going to have cancer, and 1 in 3 men in this woman are going to have cancer. That's like the statistics of it. And the biggest complication that involves with radiotherapy, it's called intrafraction tumor motion. And what that means is when a tumor or cancer is in somebody's body, they have to get radiotherapy. And when they're laying on that device, let's say it's a lung cancer or any type of cancer in the body, your bodily fluids are moving consistently, you're breathing. And when the doctors try to accurately precision the cancer treatments, normal systems, what they do is they create a bigger margin and treat the whole radiation area so they don't miss. But
and cut you open.
Yeah, and cut you open by surgery too.
Right.
Yeah, but what Accuray and with their new device, CyberKnife, the whole S7 system, it's going to be revolutionary technology. What it does is it has now incorporated synchrony. And what that means is it uses AI systems to be able to track the tumor precisely and to be able to send radiation to that tumor in a sub-millimeter manner. And the reason why I'm so excited about this new device that's coming out, the new version, S7, is the old version was able to be treated. You would have to allocate an hour time to treat the patient. But now with the new CyberKnife S7, that hour has been decreased to 15-minute treatment times. And Accuray has been a pioneer in radiation therapy. Everything from starting out with hypofractionated treatments and delving into what that means is traditionally when you have radiotherapy, patients need to go into the hospital for 6 to 8 weeks, and they're given the radio dose in a very consistent and wide manner. But with Accuray's accuracy and precision, and with all the technology that's going on, incorporating telerobotics as well, they're able to give higher doses to that tumor, and patient can just walk out of there receiving 4 or 5 treatments versus having the radiation be given over the 8 weeks and having a lot of side complications from that.
So to unpackage all that a little bit, so here's a visualization. Instead of say you have a brain tumor, Simon, and you got to go in, and a surgeon's got to cut you open, and they say, here's your chances. You got a 70 or 80% chance that this is going to work, 30% chance that you're screwed. They bump something in your brain once they cut you open. Accuray is a robotic laser that you lay down with all your clothes on. Nobody cuts you open. You lay down on the table, and it accurately shoots that laser directly at that tumor in your head. 15 minutes, it's gone. And you get up and you leave. So just the impact of that, and they have FDA approval for cancers anywhere in the body. To be able to just directly, in micromillimeters, shoot out that cancer with that laser is game changing. And their S7 system incorporates additional amount of AI with it that is just, it's game changing. And so they have their CE mark, they're selling systems, and it's really one to follow and keep an eye on.
Yes.
Duly noted, Brian. Let's change gears as I think about my mortality here. I like the robot, though, if that increases my chances rather than 70%.
Right.
Steve, what else do we have? Is there any other questions we wanted to ask Brian and Jen about robotics?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've mentioned acquisitions a little bit, and for perspective, just taking a look at Accuray and Stereotaxis. I mean, these are both very small companies, 400 million to 500 million market caps. What kind of chance, do you give them to kind of continue to blaze their own trails without being acquired? And if they, by some maybe miracle, they aren't, chased as acquisition candidates, how big do you think they become in their respective spaces? Like, what's the potential here?
Well, and that's difficult. So when I was interviewing David Fischel, the CEO of Stereotaxis, I kind of asked that same question. Is there anybody sniffing around? And what he kind of elegantly explained is that, it's a company. There's a board. They diligently have to entertain. They have to entertain any offers for their shareholders. So it's not always a choice. When you run a company, you have to entertain these offers. But I tell you, as far as Stereotaxis goes, talking to Fischel, that is a textbook balance sheet, like you see in college in an accounting class of ideally how a balance sheet is supposed to look. It's how that company's balance sheet looks. He came in, he cleaned up the whole company, cleaned up the debt, and their plan has been conservative. I would say their growth, because it's very financially conscientious the same way. So a company like Stereotaxis, I mean, the longevity, they could go forever. I mean, that's a multi-billion-dollar business. The heart ablation treatments alone, regardless, the GNXIX system can do more than that. Mm-hmm. But I mean, that area of focus right there is multi-billion-dollar marketplace right now, and they're the only ones that are using electromagnetic fields to pull a catheter from wherever it goes into your body, maybe in your leg, and pull it into your heart, manipulate it remotely through electromagnetic fields, and pull it back out, as opposed to how we normally do catheters. And I put it in you, and it's connected, and we shove it up. We just shove it up and through into your heart and try to, manipulate that from way back on the end of the hose.
3 feet away.
Yeah, like 3 feet away. With Stereotaxis' electromagnetic system, it pulls. It's more accurate. It's game changing. It's just completely more precise. It's safer to patients, when we talk about Accuray. It's just safer. Humans have a certain amount of manual dexterity. They're the best surgeon in the world. It's limited. Mm-hmm. It does not go to the decreased margin of error that these surgical robotic systems can perform.
Got me squirming a little bit here during that whole
that's conversation. That's the question I wanted to ask, though, Brian, is exactly what I think you're touching on right there, which is I'm not sure how to ask this correctly, but what is driving the adoption for these robots, right? You've got institutional knowledge in the medical community. You've got doctors that are used to being laparoscopic surgeons rather than using robotic surgery. I know you come from a medical family yourself. I mean, is it the data that is driving this, and the hospitals are adopting it, or is it regulatory groups or the government, like we saw with electronic health records, just kind of shoving it down people's throats and saying this is what you need to do now? Like, what is driving the market at the highest level for robotic surgery hire?
So any of these companies, whether it's Accuray or Stereotaxis or any of these others, there are years and years of clinical data built up for each of these procedures. So just talking about like the heart ablation treatments that Stereotaxis is doing, that's a decade of preclinical data and research and study that has gone into that. And at the same time, they've also created these what are called fellowship programs for doctors. So if a doctor's interested in, trying this, or at least, touching or learning how to use it before you spend $2 million on a new device for your hospital, a lot of these companies have these fellowship programs where doctors can go in and touch the device, manipulate the device, read the preclinical data, and really learn hands-on, and then decide, then let the doctor go to the hospital, the administration, and talk and say, we really have to buy this thing. We have to do this. But it's a hands-on approach. So it's rather than just like marketing and trying to sell to hospitals and doctors, they're marketing by teaching, just an open forum, and teaching these doctors, hey, would you like to come and take this course and use this instrument? Well, of course, if you're a doctor. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I'm nerdy enough. I'd sign up for one of those, the fellowships. But once, I think once these doctors go through those programs, they're hooked. They read the preclinical data, they've seen the results and the precision, and they're excited and they understand how to use these systems. And that's so anyway. So that's kind of the marketing direction that a lot of these companies are using to sell their devices.
So, yeah, it's really interesting. I've just kind of been thinking in the background here, talking about this kind of large company versus small company. This battle. You almost wonder what hope do these up and comers have in challenging sort of the established leaders in their niche. You talk about Intuitive Surgical. You wonder how defensible is, they've got this razor and blades model that's massively profitable. Where like in a case like Stereotaxis, I think I was reading that interview you did with their CEO, where you're talking about how they kind of cleaned up their balance sheet and they paid off, I think it was 20 million in debt, and they only had 2 million in cash on hand, and they were burning 8 million in cash a year, which isn't a good position for a company like that. So great from terms of capital allocation and balance sheet. But then you look at a company like Intuitive Surgical that I think last year generated over 1.1 billion in free cash flow, and they've got over 5 billion in cash on hand. So how disruptible are the leaders in this space, and how do you kind of determine like who and which companies have the potential to potentially, disrupt them and move around? What do you look for there? Well,
you want to look at R&D spending. You want to look at organic growth, not growth by acquisition. Intuitive Surgical just they purchased, I forgot the name of the company right now, but they purchased that healthcare database cloud technology system, which I didn't really get the synergy there. But regardless, the DaVinci-X, it's come out. I've not heard a whole lot more since. Is there another system that's going to be coming out? I mean, where's the product development? Where's the R&D? Are they just have gotten so big that they're just going to grow through acquisition? I don't like that. I like organic growth, personally. It works. And, not to mention, there are other companies out there. So for laparoscopic robotic surgery in general, so the Da Vinci system is expensive. It's very expensive. And so, there's other countries besides the US. They have hospitals that can't necessarily spend $2.5 million on a surgical robot, and not to mention like the service contract that goes along with that. So then you have companies like Transenterix, right? So they also have a laparoscopic surgical company. They're not the size of Intuitive. I don't know that they ever will be, but it doesn't really matter because they offer a similar product at a lower cost that's already being adopted by places that can't afford Intuitive system. So there's a marketplace right there. And as this technology advances, and we talked about 5G earlier, there's going to be more and more competition because it's just easier to do. And the FDA's learning curve has increased so much on surgical robotics over the past few years that it doesn't even take a quarter of the time for them to get approval. So I don't know. So the big leaders, I would say watch out.
Yeah.
And I've got to ask one more question, since we do have Steve Symington, an AI expert on this call, is are you seeing any role of machine learning in this field where today you can actually go and control the surgical robot with a human being? Are those robots now identifying tumors themselves and actually autonomously knowing exactly how to cut within a patient, knowing exactly what to do without human intervention? Are we there yet, or is that something that's still years on the horizon, Brian?
We're there. We're there. If you look at companies like ClearPoint Neuro, and I mean, Jen could probably talk to you, for 15 minutes about the AI that Accuray is using with their new CyberKnife 7. But beyond that, in general, even if you look at pharmaceuticals, or biotech, drug development, you've got companies like BioXcel out there that are using AI for multiple pipeline. So we're talking multi-pipeline, like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 different products out there in phase 2 FDA approval, because the AI systems are just allow them to exponentially increase the amount of products that they can literally put out there that they feel are ready, because it's cut years and years out of the development and testing time period. So the AI that's being used in biotech is just as impressive as the AI that's being used in surgical robotics. But yeah, I mean, it's being implemented aggressively by a lot of these companies. So yeah, I'd look at companies like Accuray and ClearPoint Neuro and BioXcel if you're interested in researching where AI is coming involved in this stuff.
Steve, I got some homework for you on those with some of the names that Brian just threw out there. AI and robotics sounds like a really great combination and definitely an interesting market for investors to be keeping an eye on. Again, today, thanks very much to Brian Gahsman, Chief Investment Officer, the Contego Capital Group, and also Portfolio Manager of the AlphaCentric Robotics and Automation Fund. Also, thanks to Jen Kwan, his analyst with that team as well. Gentlemen, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed learning about this market from you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure.
And on behalf of my colleague, Steve Symington, my name is Simon Erickson. We are here to empower you to invest in your future. We are 7 Investing.